Hey guys, Zach Dewhurst, Business Development Manager at DecoNetwork here. With us today is Jay Wilson from DTFXpert, and we're going to talk about DTF Printing. So the print room. This is what I have right behind me. The first rule is a controllable environment. And what I mean by a controllable environment is you need the temperature in that room to be around 60 to 75 degrees. The printer does not want to really print anything above 75 degrees. The room that we're in, it might get as low as 55 degrees when all the equipment is off. Not a big deal.
Can you hear me now, Zach?
Yep, I got you, Jay. Can you hear me?
I cannot hear you.
You can. You're a little faint, Jay. So 60 to 75 degrees, 55 to 70% humidity. Humidity is extremely important, and humidity does correspond with the temperature. So I just said, our room will get as low as 55 degrees. The reason being is we're in the winter, or we're in the fall coming into the winter. And anytime we have the furnace on pushing heat into the room, it's going to dry up the air. So as you increase the temperature in the winter, you're going to dry up the air. In the summer, when you have the AC on, it's going to dry up the air. So it can be a constant battle, but the goal is to keep the temperature 60 to 75 degrees when you're printing, and then have the humidity between 55 and 70 degrees when you are printing. When you're not printing, that humidity, you really don't want to get lower than 40%. Humidity, again, extremely important. You're using water-based inks. Water will evaporate when the humidity is too low. So always keep that in mind. When you're setting up your space, typically the smaller the room, the easier it is to control that temperature and humidity. And you're not battling it like you would be if you have a big open warehouse space. Much harder to control that humidity and temperature. When you're printing, good lighting. I need to be able to see the actual print. If there's any flaws in it while we are printing, I can identify it. If it's a dark room, hard to do. You want space around the equipment. You need to be able to get to all of the toggles. You need to be able to easily get behind the machine and then front of the dryer for the takeoff. Exhaust. This can be a big battle. It's extremely important that you exhaust the dryer. All of the fumes coming out of it, they're toxic. You really need to get it out, and there's a couple ways you can do it. You can just have an inline exhaust up the machine. Also including a fan is never a bad idea to suck the air and push it out. Always remember that heat rises. You don't want to force the heat to necessarily go down. You really want it to go up. And then if you don't want to put a hole in the wall, you can purchase a fume extractor. Just make sure you're buying one that's big enough for the equipment, and keep in mind that these things aren't cheap. So it can cost you several hundreds, if not thousands of dollars to get a good fume extractor to handle the printer that you've purchased. It's a lot cheaper to exhaust out the building, but you got to put a hole in the wall. Another thing to keep in mind is power. I mean, these dryers have a lot of juice that needs to go into it to make them work. So typically you need 220 volt power. Some equipment will run off 110. It's just not always the best option. 220 is typically what is necessary for one of the 24-inch dryer shaker setups. And you're going to need a 30 to 40 amp breaker with it. So before you buy equipment, make sure you're going to have a good space to be able to put it in. You can control the environment. You're not going to have any problems exhausting, whether it be buying the fume extractor or putting a hole in the wall, and that you're going to have enough power there, because you want all this set up before you get your equipment delivered. Next, we have the print driver settings. So the software side of it. First, you need to find the right color profile. So when you have somebody like Jay come to your shop to install the equipment, he'll get the software installed and make sure you're using a good color profile. Now, all of the printers have a suggested color profile that comes with it, but sometimes you kind of want to use your own or test some of the other ones out there so you get the best accurate color. Remember that DTF is really geared towards CMYK full color printing, not so much spot color printing. So if you're printing for a big company like Coca-Cola, they have a very specific color they want that red to be. And if you're screen printing and you're mixing a specific color to print that spot color, it's a lot easier to identify and keep that consistency. When you're using a digital printing process that's CMYK, it can be harder to nail that spot color, and sometimes using a different color profile is the key. So again, process for spot colors. Spot colors are a bigger challenge when you're doing a digital printing process. Big tip though, don't change the color settings once you've dialed them in. Don't be changing the saturation or the contrast or how much blue or green or yellow you use. The biggest reason why is your customers will often place reorders. And if you start messing with those color settings, you're not going to have an accurate color when you go to reprint the job. You're going to have problems. So again,
Zach,
get those.
Can you hear me?
Jay, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We got you, Jay.
Okay. Good.
All right, Jay, we're talking about the print driver settings and how you do not want to be messing with them really ever. It's a set it and forget it, right?
That's correct.
Okay, when you are printing the transfers themselves, it's very common to include things like the color bar. The color bar is the strip on the side of the film. It allows you to make sure that at no point you're losing white, CM, Y, or K. So it's a good idea to always print the color bar. If you've ever outsourced transfers and you've seen it, they're doing it to make sure that at no point the color or the print head dropped. Job name. So you may have seen, if you've outsourced transfers, at the very top there is a name, typically just printed in black ink. Tells you, hey, this is your job. If you're downloading an order from within DecoNetwork, it will be the order name, which will include the number. So it can be very easy if you're getting orders from your DecoNetwork transfer site. When you go to send the job to the printer, include the job name. Makes it a lot easier when you hand it off to the shipping department to ship. And then you have the margin. The margin is the space away from the printer. Essentially, if you're printing on 24-inch wide film, your printing is going to be essentially 22 inches wide by whatever length, because it's a roll. So the margin is essentially the distance from the edge that the print head starts printing. When you load your film or you load a new roll of film, sometimes that margin needs to be adjusted. Spacing is going to be the distance in between the prints. So as you drop your artwork in there, you then will enter the quantity, and then it will nest, essentially gang how many prints are there going to be. The spacing will be the space in between it. You really want to make sure you're not going to be battling the transfer when it comes time to cutting it out. Ganging it real tight, but then having to take more time to cut it doesn't do you much good. So make sure you're leaving yourself plenty of space when you're going to be cutting it. Loading the film and tracking. So it all starts with loading the film, and we're going to do that here in just a few minutes because I just took this photo and you can see the film is down to practically nothing. So when you reload the film, this leads to the most alignment issues. It doesn't matter how great your transfer looks, how much your colors pop. If your customer sees a white outline because you have alignment issues with your print heads, it doesn't do you much good. So it's very important that your print heads be aligned, and most of your alignment issues happen or occur from the new roll of film being loaded. And again, we'll go over a couple reasons why that happens. When we're loading the film, we're going to remember to turn the vacuum off from the actual printer. We're going to unscrew only one side of the take-up reel, and we're going to make sure we don't touch the clutch unless it is absolutely necessary. When we change rolls of film, when we're down to the last part of this film, it's become very light compared to when we're starting with the new roll of film. So that's when we have to adjust the clutch, which is essentially the tension that the film is being pulled off of the back reel. When we load the film, we have these pinch rollers on the printer. We really want to make sure it covers at least 1/4 inch of the edge of the roller. And we also want to make sure our guides on the printer cover 1/4 inch of the film. Print head alignment. So unfortunately, we have to do this sometimes. Again, typically when we load a new roll of film, potentially we need to do it. Most printers print bi-directional. What I mean by that is the print head goes left to right and it's printing in both directions. If it was unidirectional, it would just be printing as it went from left to right. That would be it. Bidirectional means prints left to right and right to left to right, right to left. So your DTG printers, most of them print bidirectional. It's much quicker than unidirectional, obviously, because the print heads are printing while it's going in both directions. When it comes to aligning print heads, DTF printers come in with a lot of different amounts of heads. You have 2 heads, you have 4 heads, you have 5 heads, 6, 8. Jay, you've seen more than a dozen. Keep in mind that whenever we're aligning our heads, we're aligning all of the other heads to head 1. So in my printer, which we're about to play with, we have 2 white heads, we have 2 CMYK heads. So what we're really going to do is we're going to align the 3 other heads, our second white and our 2 CMYK, to the white print head. So the more heads you have, the more it's going to take to align. And when we're aligning it from a vertical standpoint and a horizontal. Again, very similar to a DTG machine. You can align the heads vertically and horizontally, and a screen print press. So if you're doing micro registration, you push the screen horizontally or vertically and it adjusts for your alignment. Like I said, the more print heads there are, the more alignment there is to do and potentially be thrown off. When we are sending a print to the printer, we typically choke the white ink. So if it was printing DTG, we would first print the white and then we would print the color. When we print a transfer, we mirror the image and we print it in reverse. So we are actually printing CMYK and then white over top of it. Now, if you were printing even screen print, same thing. Pretty much every print method that has white and a color, we choke the ink at some point. What I mean by choke is we print it at just a slightly smaller size so that you don't see the underbase over the top layer of print or in the bottom layer. So if we were to screen print and we had a white underbase, we would print that at just a slightly smaller size than if the color going over top of it. With DTF, we will print the CMYK and then we'll print the white at a very small amount smaller so that we don't see that white outline. There's no chance. The common choke amount is 0.1 millimeters. Now, you can change the amount of choke. This is the one variable that sometimes we change just depending on the artwork. If you're printing very detailed designs, if you're printing like the inside neck label, you need to probably have 0 choke amount. If it's really small lines, really small text, you can't afford to choke that white. You may not lay enough white ink down, and then you're going to have problems. This, again, is the only printer variable you want to be changing. You don't want to be changing how much ink is being laid down very often. You don't want to be changing the color, contrast, saturation settings. The main setting you're going to change when you sit within the print driver is really how much the choke is for that design. Thin lines need a smaller choke. Again, sometimes no choke. It's better to make sure your print heads are aligned than to just keep choking the ink more. Choking the ink will help prevent, again, a white outline where you don't want it, but that's not really your solution. You really want to first make sure your heads are perfectly aligned and then choke the white ink just a little bit. If you are sending too much white ink to the printer, it'll bleed. So some white ink that you will purchase from a supplier, it may have a tendency to bleed more than other white ink. So whatever brand and ink you're using, try to keep that consistent. If you don't want to be using one brand and then swapping another and just going back and forth. Whatever ink is in there, it may tend to bleed more than others. Too little white is going to be less opaque. So you got to find that happy medium. Too much can bleed, cause the white to show on the edge. Too little, it can hurt how opaque your white is, or even the CMYK portion of the print. DTF powder. So this is my big container. It's measured in microns, and you can see this is white medium. So this is medium size powder. What
Hey,
we
Zach,
will. Hey Jay, can you hear us
I
now?
don't believe you're sharing your PowerPoint if you think you are.
You're now telling me that, Colin?
I had to confirm with someone else.
I'm just sitting here listening.
How about now, Colin?
Got it.
I'm sorry, guys. We're gonna make sure this is available to everybody. It's Monday, Colin. All right. So DTF powder, like I was saying, measured in microns. The finer the powder, the better the hand, but you can sacrifice a little bit of durability. You probably have been on some transfer sites, and sometimes you will see, hey, this is the powder for hats. This is the powder for bags and t-shirts and so forth. So sometimes those products that need extra durability, maybe like a jersey, you're going to want to use a medium-sized powder. It's not going to have the best feel necessarily, but it's going to give you the extra durability. The finer the powder grain, again, it's going to be a little bit softer of a hand. The print will feel a little bit better, but again, it may not hold up through the abuse that a medium powder can. Like I said, the tip, mix both fine and medium powder together. It's going to get you the best results. Store it in a low humidity environment. It's a good idea to keep your powder and any printed transfers in a humidity environment that's less than 30%, at least 40%, optimally less than 30. If your powder has humidity getting to it, it'll clump. When it clumps, when it's being spread, not optimal. You really want it to not be clumped. How it gets clumped is having humidity get to it. So avoid that.
Hey Zach,
Yeah, Jay.
sometimes we'll even put desiccant packs right into the powder, bucket of powder.
Okay.
That helps.
So within the big container I have, I probably should get one of those humidity packet dryer things, drop it in there, keep it fresh.
Yeah, you can get them off of Amazon. They're really cheap.
All right. Jay, I'm getting a lot of feedback. So spreading and shaking the powder. So you throw the powder in the hopper. The hopper then has this rubber blade that spins. There's little holes in here, and it's going to push the powder through and then drop onto the film. It's extremely important that you never run out of powder while you are printing. There are printers or shaker dryers out there that have a return. So it'll actually bring the powder back up and drop it back into the hopper, but that can create its own potential problems. So what we find with our printer is that the main job is really just making sure that we don't have a head strike, which we really never do because we make sure our film is properly tracking. And then secondly, making sure that this powder never runs out. If you print the transfer and you don't get powder on it and it goes through the dryer, it will not transfer, or it's going to have problems being washed. No powder on the ink, a worthless print.
That's the worst thing, to be pressing 100 shirts and find out that something's not sticking, or you get down to the last one and powder didn't stick to that, or you ran out of powder and now you got to reprint and buy
Jay,
new lines.
what really sucks about this is you can't always tell if it has been powder or not, especially if you're in a long run. So it's very important, again, that you always get that powder. More powder that you have currently on the film, the more it holds the film down, the better it helps track it. If you're shaking the powder too quickly, it's going to push the powder off. So it's very important that when you're shaking it, you're doing it at the right speed so that it just gets that access off of the print, but it's not pushing the powder off too quickly. And lastly, after you've shaken the excess powder, it's going into the conveyor dryer. Depending on your machine, the powder you're using and the ink will determine what temperature it needs to be cured at. What we're typically is around 130 degrees. When it comes out, it should be very smooth and kind of feel like glass. There should be no gritty feel or look to it. If it's getting a little hot, and again, if you've outsourced transfers before, you may have sometimes seen some of the ink, especially the white, become slightly yellow. It's not really a concern. You've not hurt the transfer. You've just made sure that it's 100% cured. If you're getting it too cured, the film will start to warp, and then you're going to have transfer and release problems. Other printing tips. Let the ink circulate for 30 minutes before printing. So 30 minutes before we start printing, we come in and we turn on the printer and we just let the ink circulate. I don't know if you guys can hear it in the background, but that's what you hear. The white ink is being taken from essentially the white ink container, the reservoir, and it comes back into a reservoir right above the ink dampers, which again, we'll take a look at in a second. We want to make sure that ink properly circulates. We don't want to, it's like turning your car on and immediately hitting the gas as hard as you can. You want the vehicle to warm up. You want your printer to warm up and get that ink moving. When you do add new ink, you need to agitate it. Do that by slowly rotating, and I'll show you how we're going to do that. Don't shake the ink. Shaking the ink introduces air. Air is going to cause numerous problems. You want to slowly mix it, pour it in, and then it will naturally circulate once it's in the machine. Once you've added new ink, do a test print. And you need to do head cleanings whenever necessary. If you're printing for several hours, you may not need to do either of these things. It all comes down to really how the machine is operating, what your humidity is. I mean, right now we're at 55 degrees and 56 humidity. I probably could print for an hour or two without any problems, but it doesn't take but a second to do a test print and then a minute to do a head cleaning. Do it whenever necessary, just like DTG. You want the ink flowing through the heads as good as possible. How you're really going to know if that's happening is through a test print, and then again, do a head cleaning if necessary. Before we turn off the printer, we wet cap the print heads. We put just a little bit of distilled water in each print head cap. When the print heads go on over top of it and they stay together until we print again, it just keeps it all nice and lubricated and wet. If the print heads get dry or the ink dries in the heads, you're going to have to probably replace it depending on how bad it is. These heads can be several hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. So don't want to be going through print heads. Heat pressing tips. So the film determines the transfer peel and often also the temperature. So what we do in our shop is we hot peel polyester at 260 degrees, around 40 psi for 10 seconds. If we're printing on a cotton or blends, typically we're more 320, 60 psi, 12 seconds. So poly likes to absorb that ink a little bit better, and poly and synthetic materials don't like high heat. So the lower the temperature, the less likely we are to scorch the fabric. We always press a second time for 4 seconds at least. And I'm going to show you some of the different ways or essentially materials you can press with. Everything from your craft to parchment, Teflon, denim, rubber application pad. Craft, parchment, rubber application pad, and denim. All right, guys, so I'm going to stop sharing the screen and we're just going to go to the camera. All right, you got me? So I got a job lined up. Actually, it's a real job. So let's just come in. Let's actually go back to sharing my screen. So I'm going to come in here. Should probably sort by the process. Should have had it pulled up. Got a couple DTF transfer orders. All right, guys, I don't know where I did with it, but I have a order here for 150 transfers. So that's what we're going to print right now. I've got it dialed up on the machine. So I'm just going to send it. My least favorite thing about DTF is it doesn't work on my Mac, and I hate having to work from a PC. And Jay will tell you, PCs like to update, Windows likes to update, and then you have problems with print drivers. So we're going to send this job. It's kind of hard, guys, to share the screen at the same time. So we got this job pulled up. I'm going to send 20 prints. These are some of the settings you don't want to be messing with. So I have my spot white set to 60. Like I said, some different types of inks, you actually want to lay down less white ink because it doesn't need as much, and it will bleed if you lay too much. The only variable that I ever change from order to order is the choke. So I'm actually going to do a 0.15 choke. I said I want 20 of these, so the print driver nested them, it ganged them up, and then I added some space in between to make life easier for cutting. So I'll send it to the printer. The printer will receive it. We're going to turn on the dryer. So the dryer is going to have the heating element. The guide plate is heated to somewhat dry the ink before it goes into a vertical drop down. And then back here we have our cooling fan. So as the transfer comes off, it gets cool. So we're going to turn the guide plate on. We're not ready to start shaking powder. The inversion will start rotating it. So we'll start rotating the powder onto the film and then shake the excess off here in just a moment. So you can see this is a 4-head printer. I average around 100 square feet an hour. This printer flies. Now, faster isn't necessarily better. You want quality. Jay had this printer going even faster than that at one point, but it wasn't aligning, it wasn't tracking as well. So we slowed it down. 100 square feet an hour, and I'm charging this customer $2.75 a square foot. I have around 80 cents a square foot. So, you know, by the time this video is done, we've made well over $100 in profit. And there's really not much to have to do other than babysit the machine when you compare it to something like screen printing. So I'm going to hand the computer off so we can go. And so the film is coming off. We have suction right here. So we're going to turn on the front belt suction. We're going to turn on the positive inversion. So we're going to start spreading the powder, and it's going to drop onto the film. Now, I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to drop a little bit of powder onto it because I'm trying to make a video at the same time. And again, you don't want too much or too little powder being on there. We're going to turn the powder shaker on, and now you're going to see the powder get shaken off. If I have the powder shaking at too high of a speed, it will cause problems with pushing the powder off of the edges too quickly. If we come to the back of the printer, you can see here is our reel of film. We are at the very end. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually cut this off in just a moment, and we're going to load a new roll of film. Most problems start when you load a new roll of film, and that's why we want to go over how to fix those issues. So right now we're at 77% complete. We'll let that finish. Again, our hopper of powder, I can make it go in either direction. Not that it really matters. And again, most of these settings are a set it and forget it. We're not changing the temperature of the dryer. We're not changing the belt speed or the shaker speed or the powder inversion speed. It's just not necessary to do. You kind of set it once and you're good to go. Just about finished. And again, you can see our color bar here. So if any of these colors were to drop out, if yellow stopped printing, I would be able to see it here in the color bar. We wouldn't want to print, 20 feet of film and then figure out, oh, this head wasn't printing. That's not good. Let's do a test print just to see how our ink is doing. So we'll click test. And this is going to print with all 4 print heads, and I can see if we're having any issues. Looks good. So what we're going to do is we're going to feed some of this film out. Now, what I didn't understand before, there's a sensor in the dryer. So as the printer pushes the film out as it's being printed. There's a sensor in the back that then knows for the belt to keep pulling the film down the conveyor. Again, we'll keep bringing it down more. We'll take our scissors, cut that film. All right, new roll of film, 24 inches wide, kind of heavy, especially when you compare it to the old roll. So when we swap rolls of film on the take-up, so we have your left and your right, obviously. This is your clutch. What you don't want to be doing is touching these because it's the tension that the film is coming off. What I want to do is always keep one of these two sides completely saved. I don't want to take off both reels and take them apart. So we never touch this. I'm going to unscrew this reel, push it over. Now, typically, I would have waited until we were 100% out of film. I don't think you guys just wanted to watch that. So we're going to take that off. We have our new roll of film. This roll of film, again, is, it's significantly heavier at this point. So we're going to throw that on there. Bring it over. I'm not touching the clutch at all, only if necessary. I'm going to screw it back down. Now, before I feed it through, like we talked about before, the printer, you'll see here, has little holes. It's a vacuum table. So we're going to cut the vacuum off of the machine so that when I feed the film, I don't have any problems. So now we're going to feed the film up through. I'm going to lock it down, and then I'll do the rest from the other side. Again. So when we're bringing the film through, you have your rollers. And anybody who remembers the days of cutting vinyl, which are going away, when you have a roller, you want to make sure that the edge of the film is like not on the very edge of the roller. So I try to make sure at least a 1/4 of an inch of the film is being covered by both far end rollers. Now this is in the middle. This is just about a 1/4 of an inch, a little less than ideal. Then we have our guides here. So we have a guide on both sides. The guides are going to prevent the film from coming up and then the print head hitting it, which is a head strike. When you have a head strike, you are putting your print head at jeopardy from being totaled. And again, very expensive. What you really don't want is you don't want this coating to get onto the head. It can clog it and cause a lot of problems. So we always make sure that we have a 1/4 of an inch of the film being covered by the two guide plates. Something that's easy to forget is to remember to turn the vacuum back on. So I want this to be sucking, so I'm going to turn the vacuum back up. So we're good to go. All right, so let's put that down. Another thing I'm going to do when I do this is I want to make sure that the film is coming off of the roll. I'm going to feel the edges. I don't want to feel anything off. It needs to be all smooth and in line. While we're back here, let's talk about mixing ink. So you may hear right now, so we have our white ink and our CMYK. I'm going to show you the reservoir in just a moment. Whenever we dump a new bottle of white ink in, if it is a CMYK, don't really need to mix it. Just don't need to. When it comes to white ink, what we want to do, I've got a whole case of white from Jay. I'm going to drop it on the ink stir. Again, Jay, I'm going to turn it on, and it's going to slowly rotate the white ink. If I were to shake it, I'm going to introduce a bunch of air bubbles, and then I'm going to cause problems once it's in the machine. So the ink stir, I always let it stir the ink for half an hour or longer before we take a new bottle of white and dump it in. So come back. I don't know if I can get this case off or not. Sorry guys, I'm not putting that in jeopardy. Inside here, there's a little reservoir, and then it comes where that white ink comes in. So it'll come there, it'll come into that reservoir, and then it will take it from the reservoir and dig it back to there. And that's the circulation. It's circulating it between the two, then it comes down into the ink head dampers. That's essentially your trap for any debris and so forth. It kind of keeps everything clean, and then it goes into the head. Jay, I hope I'm in the ballpark with some of this. So we're going to feed the film down. What I don't like to do is I don't like to battle any of this. Don't be too cheap. Realize that the ink, the powder, the film, it is inexpensive when you compare it to other decoration processes. DTG, I rarely would get away with printing on a black t-shirt for only, you know, $1, $2. It's extremely rare. With DTF, your cost is so minimal. Use the best consumables you can, and not only use the best consumables, but just don't battle things. I'm going to shoot the film out until it starts entering the dryer. Yeah, I probably have $4 in that, but I'm not pulling my hair out and going to have problems in other ways. So again, we're going to send a print to the machine. So we'll send 60. Okay, it's finishing up. Remember, what you sometimes have to adjust when you load a new roll of film is the margin. So again, the distance that the print starts, including the color bar. So if I loaded the film and all of a sudden it's half an inch that way, I'm going to have to change the margin, or essentially where the print will start. When we need to play with the alignment, what we'll do, I have a jeweler's loop. Jay has a much cooler device. When you do alignment, it's going to print a bunch of lines and other times dots, and you're going to make sure that you're going to line the other heads to that first head. So again, I have a forehead. I'm going to line my other 3 to that first head, and those lines are very thin. So having a jeweler's loop or something else that allows you to magnify what you're looking at, you're better off. Keep that going. Again, though, 100 square feet an hour, we're making around $265. Now, in this case, I'll be making around $2 a square foot. So $2 a square foot, I have a 150 piece order. Can make $300 profit from this in really just around an hour and a half, hour and 20 minutes. So extremely profitable decoration process, especially if you're selling transfers. So my old layer of film is coming off. Oh, turn off the shaker. Whew.
Maybe
full of
we
print.
should pause. Maybe we should pause the printer.
No, Jay, what's the fun in that? Jay just doesn't want me calling him up having to fix it. Because, did something. Jay, you probably advise a lot of things. They nod their head, yeah, yeah. And then you leave, and then they start doing everything you said not to. Call you up.
Can you see my screen? Can you see me on your screen,
I can
Zach?
see you. I can see that
Okay.
operation behind you.
Yeah, I'm down in Miami, and I was installing a printer and working on the UV printer a little bit, but
A UV printer.
yeah,
UV is
this
what we're going to talk about next week, Jay. UV is essentially the new three-dimensional sticker everybody likes.
yeah. This is only one
Remember,
part of the facility, though. I mean, they've got several printers in here, and I was working in the other part. I thought it was going to be quiet in here, but it's really not.
now, again, challenge, you got to make sure you're getting powder on there and shaking it off. So if you don't have powder in a certain spot, your print will be cold. All right, Jay. Now, last step. Let's play with the transfer that's been printed. So I printed some this morning. I don't have a big press in here, so we're going to play with the Skull 360 hat press. So we're going to
Most,
press down,
most
take all the
people have
moisture out of the print.
most people have problems with hats.
What?
I said most people have problems with hats when it comes to pressing them. They don't have a good press.
Well, this is an $1,800 hat press. They probably didn't spend that much on it. Skulls makes really the best of any equipment, electronics that is. Um, you get what you pay for out of a hat press, or, well, any press. Um, when it comes to hats, though, Jay, because it can be a challenge, I prefer to always cold peel them. Um,
I do too.
anything that's a small print, it's easier to cold peel and not risk anything. And I'll also be honest, I can't peel anything anymore like I used to. But nice, I mean, you can't easily DTG that. It's just a game changer as to what all you can print on. Back in the day, maybe we used heat transfer vinyl. We'd have to cut one color at a time until the wide format printer cutters came out. Um, but yeah. All right, Jay, what other tips and tricks did I miss? Oh, here, something else to talk about. Pressing a transfer a second time. Craft paper, it works. It's what we use for most of ours. It kind of keeps that, it keeps a little bit of a gloss look. Parchment can give us a little bit more of a matte. We use that more for DTG. Your Teflon, again, kind of a gloss look. What we've started using more and more of, denim. So we went to Joann Fabric, got ourselves a piece of denim. We pressed this on a transfer that has a big glob of ink. We don't do it every time. We do it when it makes sense. If I'm doing this as a left chest, it's not going to feel like a glob of ink. The hand is not going to be terrible. I don't have a problem hitting it with the craft paper. But if I'm doing a full-on print, the rubber application pad or that denim is going to be your best friend. So the rubber application pad, I believe, is the Stahl's product. The denim, just go to Joann, Michaels, get some of
What
that. Try it out.
what do those second presses with those cover sheets? What do they do to the print, Zach? How does it make
Well,
does it make it feel different? What does it do?
one, it gives me peace of mind pressing it a second time versus not, but it does. It helps create some pores in the print and just get that little
Puts
bit more of
text
that
puts
green print.
texture in it. Yeah.
Yeah. Jay, what else do you have?
You know, you're going so fast. I just let you go with it. I mean, it's I'm sitting here looking dumb. So
I learned from
I
the
think
best.
I think you touched on some good points. It it was a little fast, but it gives you it breaks down the process of what you're doing.
And it doesn't matter if it's, again, just that startup one print head. I mean, again, I see a lot of people behind you right now. It's all the same logic, just more machines working,
Correct.
right?
Exactly.
Let's see if there's anything else. Let's see if we have any questions. I don't see any questions at the moment. All right, Jay. Well, if we do have questions, they can hit you up at DTFXperts, right?
They can.
Yep. Highly suggest reaching out to Jay if you have any questions about purchasing equipment, buying consumables, or you just need your current setup fixed. I've referred a lot of desperate printers to you, Jay, that bought equipment from China or a dealer that just wanted to sell them something, and Jay's a true expert that can help you get the most out of it. So
Yep.
check out DTF Experts. Jay, hopefully everybody found this helpful. Look forward to doing another one on UV printing next week with you.
Thank you, Zach.
All right, thanks, guys.